Hare and Tortoise Recordings presents Odious Villains by Hong Mai Lien. Translated and edited by David Michael. Audio recording produced and narrated by Lawrence Watusi. Chapter 3. Go by Meat. Ong seemed to be smiling, but was actually not, as he looked at Louis. His eyes were full of furious challenges, which made Louis's kidneys go cold with the hormonic toxins that were secreted out of fear. Ong was obviously half a head shorter than him, but he still made Louis greatly anxious. Ong stepped forward, and Louis unconsciously stepped backward. Ong stepped forward again, and Louis turned his back, running away. Psh! The dagger flew out from Ong's palm, zooming past Louis, swooping right past his head, cutting off one of his ears on the flyby, and then it was stuck onto the door. If the dagger had been a little more inclined, it would have stuck into Louis's nape. Since the dagger had deeply penetrated into the door, thus everyone that was present in the room had noted its potential velocity. Although Louis's head was hard, Ong could have killed him if he had wanted to. The most important aspect was in the throwing skills of Ong, which had made Keon more scared. Ong's arm was basically unsteady. However, his throwing strength was just based on the strength and flexibility of his wrist. And if any such child at this age had wanted to throw the dagger like this, that child might have had to use their entire arm in doing so. But Ong had just moved once, in one clean, swift motion, as his shoulders hadn't even moved a bit. Although Keon, who could not have practiced any of the advanced sec techniques but only the boring physical terrain impulse basic stages of training, he still knew exactly how to move, in which moving his hips and shoulders, and then finally flicking his wrist, which would have induced forth the most solid force of movement. Ong only used the strength from his wrist, and it was enough for the other children to admire him. That such a skinny and weak body could potentially be so strong. Up to this time, Keon had made his decisions in teaching the class, omitting many of the elements and techniques that could have pushed Ong's potential to be trained. This place was the elusive immortal casket, so every street and alley had its own potential power. The name of the 9 immaculate hoodlums, although it seemed to be famous, actually, they were just a little famous. No matter wherever it was, among the 16 kingdoms, the most powerful person was the greatest cultivating practitioner. Of the 9 immaculate hoodlums, only the eldest brother and the 9th could have practiced together. The eldest brother's health was now very limited, and after he had reached the 2nd stage, he could not advance anymore. So not only was the 9th's health poor, but he could not have received any formal training as a cultivating practitioner. As a result, it was hard for him to advance. If they did not want to lose their jurisdiction of the township to the others' lands, they would have needed to frequently improve their own powers, always cultivating and practicing continually. Therefore, each of the streets in the elusive mortal casket had one school. The schools did not teach general fundamentals of being a scholar or doctor, but grand designs of treachery and pillaging. It was also free so that any child could have come to study. However, the initial fundamentals and requirements was that the child must have joined the clan. According to the other 8 of the 9 immaculate hoodlums, such a wasted one as Ong would have been sent away a very long time ago. It was even unknown who it was of the immaculate 9 that had accepted Ong, for they must have been pissed drunk during the quarterly evaluations. But Keon used to say that it was not because a person was to be seen as a waste that he could have been dismissed. Putting forth such judgments like this had only made the townspeople confused, and they would see that the school of the southern Evergreen town was not serious. As a result, they would have not allowed their children to study there. The remaining 8 of the immaculate 9 actually did not agree upon this school during their early days. In their minds, the hoodlums thought that if they wanted to recruit potential gang members by opening a school, the boy must have been young and strong. Though, in raising a child, it would have taken at least 10 long years before they were able to make use of him, and that was too long. However, Keon did not think the same. Kian assumed that the teenagers who were 17 or 18 years old would have no passions for studying, although they were strong, and even if they did have the passion, it was already strenuous enough to discipline and overcome their rowdy behavior, let alone teaching them. Children were different. Children were simple and had no concepts on what the basis of life was supposed to be. If they were trained from the beginning, not only would they have thoroughly learned martial arts, but also survival skills. However, the most important aspect was in cultivating their loyalty. Anyway, the remaining immaculate hoodlums did not care about children, so they simply handed them over to Kian to teach and cultivate them. Few people came here just for fun due to their sudden, impulsive aspirations of being a teacher. When Kian saw Ong's change, he had immediately decided to train that child, as he had now realized that he had been wrong in the past. And although Louis' henchmen looked aggressive, they did not care about studying. They were only aggressive in spirit and appearance, but they also did not have any potential. Although Ong was younger, and his body was also not physically imposing, he was still brimming with too much potential. Kian used to try cramming ideologies and advanced sect techniques into the other children's heads at the school, but none of them had enough of the required attention span to have any potential in studying. If Ong could be a true disciple, Kian surely then wanted to bring him to the ninth. "Do you want to kill him?" Kian asked. Ong moved forward, ripped the dagger out of the door, and shook his head. "No, at least not for today. These bastards have bullied me for many years, and if I had killed them right now, how could I ask for further payments? Today's debt is for today. Yesterday's debt is for tomorrow, and the debt before yesterday will be paid on the day after tomorrow. Therefore, they are going to be paying me until I have settled their debts." He turned to look at Louis, as Louis was holding the side of his head and shaking. He looked at Ong in fear, as if Ong had become a demon. Ong smiled at Louis, moved to him, and slapped his shoulder. When his hand had just touched Louis' shoulder, Louis had completely lost control and shook even harder. And so Ong gladly laughed. "I see in your eyes that there is a little fear, a little snide of hatred, and a little cruelty. If you want revenge, I will give you a chance. Today you would just kick me once, so I have only acquired one of your ears. So how about yesterday's debt? Do you still remember? If you cannot clearly remember, I'll tell you tomorrow." "Kill me if you dare!" Louis was totally frightened, but his eyes were still flushed up. "Ong, if you do not care to kill me now, I will kill you sooner or later." Ong laughed more gleefully. "That's so very good. I do not wish for a boring life." "Fuck off!" He suddenly shouted loudly, but Louis was not prepared, so he was so scared that he tried to hide. Though his leg was dead limp, he fell to the floor. His face contained a pitiful look that was full of impetuous hatred. In the past, it was only him who looked down on other people, where no one had dared to look down on him. Now Ong, a skinny child who was many times weaker than him, had just only stared at him once, and he already felt as his heart was about to explode. In the past, for him, roaring was the only way to react from coming out of a terrible fright. He felt frightened and also subdued, but he could not know why he had no courage to fight back. And then he cried. The one who had bullied the other children for so many years was now frightened to tears. Louis cried while he stood up, and he held his ear and ran out. The other children in the classroom looked at each other. No one dared to speak or even breathe. They looked at Ong as if he had come for another world. They looked around to make sure that they were also in the same habitual classroom, the familiar classmates and Kian, but Ong had become so strange and out of place that they were dazed. "This is enough for today. You will take Meng and Wang to the infirmary," Kian said as he stared at Aang. "You follow me. I have some questions for you." Ong shook his head again. "No." Kian went pale. "Are you disobeying me?" Ong said, "I am seriously injured. Meng and Wang have beaten me too brutally and my internal organs are damaged. I need to check in the infirmary. Mr. Kian, you'd like me to go with you since you must want to teach me something, but with my heavily injured body, I'm afraid that I cannot afford to learn any more life lessons from you today, Mr. Kian." Kian was surprised as to why Ong suddenly became another person. Basically, he was not like a child. He spoke clearly, not arrogantly or flatteringly. Moreover, it looked like he was very familiar with his body. Such a fast and decisive movement as Ong had done, one needed to have practiced and cultivated endlessly for the last 2 years, aside from the fact that Ong was a genius. So you can leave. Once you feel revived, come to the Immaculate Hall to find me. Finishing his words, Keon went away, and just as he arrived at the door of the classroom, he pulled out a silver bar from his sleeves, throwing it to Ong. Go and buy some meat. Ong caught the silver bar, smiled, and said with his hands clasped together, Thank you, Mr. Keon. No one noted that behind this smile was the most extreme depression. From Ong's memory, he knew how to survive in this place. This was the elusive immortal casket, where everyone's guilt was clearly revealed without any covers. To survive in this place, he definitely needed to make his inhabitants accept him, though he didn't plan to stay here long, as he would wait until his health had recovered before he left. Although the situations in this place have made many people repulsed and sick, it was temporarily safe. Here, Ong had determined that a person who had already reached the great triadic stage did not exist, so no one would have realized his eccentric demeanor. Though his soul was extremely strong, even if 10 opulent mortals of the great triadic stage had surrounded him, he could have escaped them. However, the results were also terrible. The enemy was really cunning and cruel. Of the 10 opulent mortals of the great triadic stage, they obviously were the only two who had shadowed some men of the basic void stage, as though men could have stealthily beaten him silly, if not for the basic void stage and above. It would have been easy for him to escape. The elusive immortal casket was a quiet place, though those baddies there were the worst of baddies that could have been compared with the totality of the 16 kingdoms. Thus, the true heroes looked down on this place. The last thing they would have done was to live here, so Ong decided to stay here. Once staying here, he had to slow down his oncoming depression. At first, he needed to understand the situation and politics of this place, but later, he would have gotten rid of all the things that had made this place disgusting. If it was not due to his random spawn, he would not have come to live in such an inferior and vile place like this. Ong? While Ong was thinking, he heard someone calling. Ong turned back and found that the person was Fatty. For this child, Ong quite appreciated. If Fatty hadn't counted on him, Ong wouldn't have been able to have lived until now. How could an orphan live in such a place as the elusive immortal casket so easily? So Ong smiled and firmly grasped Fatty's shoulder. Let's go. Fatty was a little shaken because he had seen that Ong's manner was really weird today. No one knew Ong more clearly than him. Although Ong's appearance did not change, his eyes were totally different compared with how they were in the past. He was not timid anymore when facing people. He only had confident manners now, as his confidence was now the same of that as when Fatty himself had used to step all over people. However, although Fatty doubted that Ong had really changed, he did not assume that his closest friend was already dead. Now, little did he know that the soul in this body really did used to step on all sorts of people. Where will we go? Fatty unconsciously asked. Ong threw him the silver bar in his hand. Go buy meat. But didn't you say that you would like to cure your injuries? Eating meat is to cure my injuries. Huh, why didn't I know this? There are many things you don't know. Hey, also from now on, I'll protect you. But it was me who had protected you in the past. What, aren't you happy? Neither. All right, I'll follow you from now on. Good for you. I want to ask you a question. Where do they sell good meat? I've only enjoyed the meat that has been portioned out and left on the counter before I've even woken up, and which I've cooked for myself, and only when my big brother comes home could I eat. How about you? Do you know where they sell the best meat? I certainly have never enjoyed meat. How could I know? Then they wrapped their arms around each other's shoulders and walked away. Fatty wouldn't believe how his life would be changed from that day forward.